And welcome back, mystery lovers, pill seekers, and conspiratorialists all across the fluid plain. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we discuss many things, strange mysteries, and all sorts of oddities.
Snakes.
And we talk about snakes.
Snakes made of stone.
Giant
stone snakes with wings.
Yeah, so that just reminds me, like, you know...
And horns.
And horns. You know quite a bit about the Serpent Mound?
Yeah.
Why don't you give us the deal on that one, buddy?
Okay, so the Serpentine Mound in Ohio is, according to Orthodox archaeology, a mound it's an earthen mound. It also has some burials in it, as far as we know. They did a few excavations into the side of it, but it was built on the top of a hill, sort of above a river basin area, and it's not really a mound. It's like a
geoform or something.
Yeah, it's basically like a geoglyph, right? Yeah. But it's made of dirt and rock, and it's sort of rounded, like the half of a snake body, right? Like if the top half of the body of a snake was sticking out of the ground, it looks like that.
Yeah.
And it starts out with like a sort of a fork shape, which is the mouth of the serpent, and there's like an egg oval shape looking like in the mouth, and then it...
By fork, you mean like two halves of the...
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's basically like the mouth is sort of going around an egg, what looks like an egg, sort of an oval shape. And then the body of the serpent makes three main bends, or U-bends, three U-shaped bends, and they're in a curve. And then it coils up into a spiral at the end where the tail is. And they've actually found that the actual directions of the U-bends, because there's really 6 of them. If you take one U, like I guess it's like a...
There's 3 sides of it. You mean there's 3 lines or whatever?
Well, like if you make a U-bend and then you go back up and make another U-bend, you've got 2 U-bends facing one direction and 1 U-bend facing the other direction.
Okay,
right?
Yeah.
So it does this. So it would be 5 U-bends total, because there's 3 facing one direction,
right, and
then 2 facing the other direction, I believe. And at the apex of the curve of each U-bend is an alignment. There's the... I think it's all lunar.
Yeah.
Like there's the minimum north rise, maximum north set.
That's really cool.
Like all these cycles of the moon, and the mouth of the serpent is a lunar eclipse predictor. Like the line that goes straight off of the mouth is a... I'm sorry. I think it's solar eclipse.
No, it's a lunar. I know it's
okay. Lunar, it is a lunar eclipse.
I know it's a lunar eclipse predictor. I didn't know it was the mouth. That's badass.
Yeah. So you can look up. We can put a picture of this on the, link to the podcast or whatever. But there's some that have all the lines showing the trajectory or whatever.
Yeah, I've got overhead pictures of it, and then I've got the schematic too.
Right. So it's basically, they say it was built by the Native American tribes that's known to have existed in that area.
Yeah.
No one's really sure, though, because as far as I know, they didn't claim to have built it.
Right.
This is the same story, right?
Classic, yeah.
But as it turns out, the sort of promontory that it's built upon, this sort of rock promontory that sticks out, and it has cliffs around it, drops down into a valley. It's right on the edge of a massive impact site.
An astrobleme.
There's a huge crater there. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
The Serpentine Mound, I can't remember what the direction is. I'd have to look it up on Google Map, but I think it's on the southern point of it, maybe. But it's this massive, you can see it on certain maps, you'll see the dotted line that shows you the outside of the crater.
Yeah.
But it's freaking huge, and the Serpentine Mound itself is built on top of one of the biggest geomagnetic anomalies on the planet, I think.
Oh.
I could be wrong about it. It might be in
I know it's anomalous
in North
that.
America.
Yeah, I know it's anomalous there. Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of looks like the strata there has been like flipped on its side.
Oh yeah. I mean that crater is humongous. So
Yeah.
there's I wouldn't be surprised.
But yeah, whoever built that mound had they didn't just throw that shit up. Like, they had a very good understanding of astronomy.
Right.
Like, to be able to.
And they obviously
to be
knew
able
that
to do
was they obviously knew that was an astrobleem right there. They knew that was an old crater.
Right,
Which
so-
is like, you can't tell from the ground. You
Right.
just
So
can't.
one of the ways to interpret the symbol is the serpent coming from the spiral. The way I looked at it was like the spiral tail of the Serpentine Mound is actually like the orbit of this body that impacted the Earth. Right. It's like, say
Yeah.
it was in the Kuiper Belt or whatever, and it's just going around and around and around and around. Eventually, its destiny is Earth, and the U-bends are it coming into the inner solar system and going around the planets.
Yeah, it's getting passed back and forth
Through the planets, and then
Yeah.
it impacts the Earth, and that's the mouth around the egg.
Yeah, the egg is the impactor.
Right, and the mouth and the egg are located closest to the edge, the wall of the
Yeah.
crater. So it's like the serpent from the sky,
Yep.
coming down.
Yep.
It's freaking badass. I love that freaking sight, man. And I have not found any dating on
Yeah.
that impact site, so I don't know. I don't know if that impact site is within the timeline of the Native Americans who they say built it,
Oh no.
or is it way older than that?
Yeah, I have the consolidated Earth impacts database on Google Earth, where it's basically like it's got So when you pull it up, it's got every freaking known impact, and like that one I remember it's hundreds of millions of years old, which is why.
Okay, so that would mean that whoever built it had to have known that
Yeah, they had to be able to tell it was
they knew what that was, basically.
right, which is why it's impressive, because you can't fucking tell.
Right, you can't tell.
Like from satellite pictures or from like way up in a plane, you can kind of see that there's a circular form there, but
I mean, I can't
on the ground you can't fucking tell.
I've looked on Google Earth, and I can't tell that there's a. It doesn't look like to me that there's any crater there.
Yeah.
But you can find the places where, like, whatever their maps of those craters where they outline it.
Right. Yeah, and like,
And I guess you could like with the outline there, you can kind of see that there's a different. But without it, it's like hard to tell.
yeah,
At all.
and on the ground you would just see you would see the crater edge. There will be it's really degraded, but like the strata on the outside edge of the crater is pushed up because of the explosion. Because when an impact happens, the thing embeds itself in the ground and then it blows up, and so it's actually a pock mark. It's pushed up. So that's pretty. Like if when you see that and you start following the ridge line of this strata that's like pushed upwards like that, and it goes all the way around a big circle, you know it's an astrobleem. But it probably doesn't go completely around in a circle because it's so old that it's heavily eroded.
Yeah.
But I bet you the reason there is a magnetic anomaly there is because that object is still down in the ground, probably.
That'd be badass. But I mean, if that's true about the age of that crater. I mean, of course, it's questionable whether they can accurately date that anyway. But
Yeah.
if that's true that it's that old, that's strange to me. Like, I imagine that whoever built that mound either witnessed it from afar or had it was more recent to where it was like visibly.
Well, like according to Michael Cremo, we've been around for hundreds of millions of years.
But that mound, I don't know how long that would stay. This is the other thing. I saw some sort of.
Well, if they kept fixing it.
Yeah, I saw some illustrations of the excavations they did into it, and there were skeleton. There was like one, had a skeleton in there. And so that's another question. Like, are they intrusive burials?
Yeah, I think they are.
or is that legit?
I mean, like, dude, it was totally the Giants. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think. Okay, so this is interesting. This is kind of where I wanted to go with this. Like, oops, we've talked about we've talked about Sumer and the Anunnaki. Like the Sumerians say that the Anunnaki are not them. Like, they're somebody else. Like, whether they're aliens or they're like some other kind of human that is, I don't know. But they're clearly not the Sumerians, right?
Yeah.
So this is interesting. The Hopi Indians, in their language, Naki means friend, and Anu means snake. So the Anunnaki are the snake people.
Snake friends.
Or I'm sorry, not snake, ant. Anu means ant.
The ant
They're
people.
the ant people, bro. Like, the Anunnaki are the ones that helped the Hopi live underground. Right? Another thing I found out, taking Inca or taking Sumerian words or whatever and like finding out if they mean something. Inca means great lord in Sumerian. Inca.
Yeah.
Great lord. So the Inca rulers, that's why they call themselves that. Like, and that's, but then of course people will be like, wait a minute, like Sumer is in Iraq, and you're talking about South America, but
They both built pyramids.
that's right. They both built pyramids. But somebody went around the world building megalithic structures that aren't not just pyramids, but like, the workmanship you can see like all over the world, that it's the same style, the huge polygonal blocks that are all like heterogeneous, dry laid, and they have the little square one is surrounded by the huge big ones.
Yeah.
They've got that classic thing. And then the keystone cuts. Have you ever talked about those?
No.
If you're down in Peru, or you're at Tiwanaku, or you're at Ollantaytambo, or you're in Cusco, or any of those places in Peru, there are huge megalithic blocks strewn everywhere, and you can see on some of them that like on one edge of the block there will be this T shape, like a groove cut into the edge of the block. So like if the block is sitting flat, and on the edge facing you, there's a like what looks like a capital letter T, but it's a groove cut down into the block. Okay, that's a keystone cut. Somewhere there's another block that has a corresponding T shape cut into it, so that if you put the blocks together, you have what looks like a sideways eye. Right? You put the blocks together to where the bottoms of the T's, the grooves, touch each other, and so that makes a sideways capital I. Mm-hmm. And they would pour molten metal into the groove to form what's called a keystone clamp. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is a really like a unique or strange way of it's kind of a weird thing to do. Like, it's a unique thing to do when you're building with stone, but keystone cuts are found all over the world. Like they're in Egypt, and the ones in Egypt look more like axe heads. It's weird. Like you'll see they have some that are shaped like T's or I's or whatever, but they also have ones that like where one side is kind of a wedge, and the other side is like a different shaped, like a bulbous thing. Like it kind of looks like a tomahawk. Like one side is rounded and the other side's like an axe. But what's interesting is that in Egypt, you'll find these keystone cuts on the blocks or whatever, but then there's these Old Kingdom walls. Okay, so Old Kingdom walls that have keystone cuts on the side. In other words, you look at the wall and you see half of a cut, in one of the blocks, and it's on the side or whatever. And in some places they actually put them together to where there's like two of them and they're matching, but they're on the side, which means they won't work. You can't pour metal into it when it's on the side of the wall. They only work when they're on the top of the block.
Right, if you're pouring molten metal into it, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously somebody reused blocks from an older wall, but this is Old Kingdom construction, which makes those keystone cuts
And they put the 2 blocks that had the keystone together sideways.
Yes, on the side. Like not all of them. Like you'll see, like in the I can put the picture of this in the show notes. But the wall has keystone cuts all in it. They're just random.
Yeah. Okay.
And some of them have been matched, but they're all on the side, which means that they won't work. Like so, and it's obviously that the wall was built reusing old blocks from some other construction, and it's Old Kingdom construction, which is important. Because that means that whoever actually originally made the wall that had those keystone cuts in them with the original keystones were building megalithic constructions previous to the Old Kingdom of Egypt.
Yeah.
Okay. They have them in Vietnam. And this is interesting. Like in Vietnam, the place that they have them in is called Kem. And the people were called Kem. They have a little island or whatever. And there's like this ancient megalithic city with keystone cuts in it. And they called it Kem. Now the ancient name for Egypt was Kemet. Mm-hmm. Khemit, right? This is where we get, like, so in any word you see, like, Cambodia. Okay, that's Cambodia is named after the Egyptian people, Cambodia. Chemistry, right, came from alchemy, which alchemy means way of Egypt.
That's badass.
Right, so we have chemistry, which comes from alchemy. So chemistry is like the study of the way of Egypt, right? Or the understanding of the way of Egypt. So yeah, there's keystone cuts in Peru. They're in Bolivia. They are in Egypt. They're in Vietnam. They're all over the world. Okay, and they're also in Tiwanaku, which is like, I think Tiwanaku is, it's the one that's on Lake Titicaca, or like, it's like 14 miles away from it or whatever. And it's been thrown, it's made out of humongous megalithic blocks that have been thrown all over the place, like some kind of enormous cataclysm happened.
Yeah.
Right. And I was looking at some pictures, which is really interesting because Bolivia, the Bolivian government has started to dig there again. They're like, they saw ancient aliens was making a big deal out, and they're like, maybe we should go dig there, right? So they've been digging it up, and they've dug this deep trench, and it's basically like, you can see from the side of the trench the profile of the dirt. It's basically like a mud flow, right? You see, there's a little bit of grass on top, and then it's just like a huge thick layer of muck, and they've been uncovering these gigantic blocks down in the muck, and they're sitting on columns of mud because they're all in different places underneath the mud, and they dig down to it, and they dig around it, and then they dig down to the bottom of the trench, and then they leave the block sitting on this column of mud.
Yeah.
And so they're like in 3D scattered all throughout it, right? But it seems pretty obvious that Tiwanaku was some kind of metallurgical site. They were doing, like, there's all these little tunnels that go underneath everything, and like they've drawn some diagrams of, like, the original at Pumapunku, the pyramid there was supposedly was the largest pyramid in the world known right now. It was humongous, and it had a lake on top of it.
Holy shit.
And they actually had to use some kind of pump to get water up into the lake, and then water would flow off all sides of the pyramid, going down through these little channels and everything, and they would be washing ores, and then that kind of connects to the whatever the towers are, the Silasani towers, the megalithic towers out there. Those were probably blast furnaces where they were like, so because there's a little bitty hole down at the bottom of the tower that no one can, it's not an entrance, you can't get in there, but they could dump ore in the top of the tower, and if they had some kind of like a hot coal fire going in there, then the ore would go in there, and then just like molten metal would come running out of the bottom of the and I think the Anunnaki were doing all of this.
Why is that?
Well, because their name is everywhere, associated with this stuff. Like and then the Sumerian, like, why did
Tiwanaku?
Why did the Inca? Yeah, why did the
Tiwanaku?
Why did the Inca call themselves Inca, like Great Lord in Sumerian?
Yeah.
Right. So in Bolivia, they found this ceramic bowl, and it's a really weird story. Like this old poor dude had it, and he was using it to feed his pigs, right? It's this kind of big flat sort of ceramic bowl, and he would use it to bring slop to his pigs that he'd, you know. But some Bolivian archaeologists saw it or whatever. They were like, that has inscriptions around the rim of the bowl or whatever. And they're really strange inscriptions. And there's not supposed to be any writing ever in South America. None of those cultures had any writing, right? The Maya had their, what are they called? The quipu, with the knots. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-mm.
The Maya had some weird way of writing, which involved like strings and knots of different colors, and that's how they would make their books or their records. It would be this like incredibly complicated thing of knots, and somehow by counting the knots or whatever in the different colors of the string, you could get.
I thought are you talking about in South America?
Yeah, but I'm talking. So the Maya were in Central and Central America and Mexico, but yeah, in South America there was no writing, according to mainstream archaeology.
Okay.
It's bullshit. Okay.
Well,
but anyway,
the Maya there was like when supposedly they burned like shitloads of books when the Spanish came over here.
There were these things I'm talking about. They had knots and shit. I'm pretty sure.
And then there's like, what are they're not like.
Well, there was the Popol Vuh and something else.
I'm trying to think of, it's not hieroglyph, but some other glyph that was it the Aztecs or whatever?
The Mayans had. They made those really complicated three-dimensional glyphs.
They look like faces.
Yeah.
Of all these different little.
Yeah, there's like this stairway with all the.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Mayans.
Yeah.
Yeah. But.
I thought those symbols were their form of writing.
It is. Yeah. But what I'm talking about is like these books they would make were. They used like knots and string. I don't know. And maybe that's not. Maybe they. Because I know that there's the Popol Vuh, and I think that has pictures in it, like illustrations. But I know that there were thousands and thousands of these things that were basically like I don't know how to describe them. There were these weird, complicated webs of string that had knots all in them or whatever, and they meant something. People could keep records that way and other stuff.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but so
it's not writing.
Stringing you along with not writing. Yeah, but so they found this. So they got the bowl from this guy. Okay, this ceramic bowl from this dude down in Bolivia by giving him a house. They're like, "Look, we'll give you a house if you give us this bowl." And he's like, "Okay, fair deal." Right? So they get the bowl, and it has two different forms of writing on it. It has Proto-Sumerian cuneiform.
There you are.
And then the Sumerian version of hieroglyphs, which they also used. Okay. So on one side, it's the Sumerian hieroglyphs, and the other side, it's like Proto-Sumerian cuneiform. It's in Bolivia, in South America, and now it's in a museum, and it's in a museum in Bolivia, and like
no one's translated it.
Well, it's been translated. Yeah, Sumerian experts have translated it, and it's basically it's kind of what you would expect. It's like it's praising some goddess or whatever. It's a libation bowl or whatever, and it's typical Sumerian. It's really hard to understand, but they're basically like, so everything's awesome, and she gives us all this stuff, and like we use this bowl to pour things out, whatever. I remember reading the translation. I was just like, what? What did that say? And I go back and read it again, and then find some other dude that translated it, and I'm like, that's completely different.
Yeah.
But this is what makes me think that they were here. Like, obviously somebody was here. How did that bowl get here?
Yeah, well, when did they find it? I mean, I don't know.
Recently.
Right, so that guy could have gotten it recently from...
Yeah, but it's made of clay from the area.
Oh, okay.
Right? It's like the bowl was made in the area where they got it or whatever. So it's like it's not it's a local bowl made with local materials, but it has Sumerian cuneiform on it. That's
badass. Where did he find that fucking bowl?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Go dig there.
Yeah. But I don't know, I've been looking at all this stuff, and I've been watching a lot of David Hatcher Childress videos, right? Well, not really watching them. I get the video play and I put my phone in the pocket and just listen to him. He's going, all these different conferences where he's talking to people, and he's really big on the keystone cuts. He loves the megaliths.
Proud of that one.
He's like, my thing really is these humongous giant blocks. Archaeologists really they can't explain how these were moved. But yeah, he gives badass presentations, and he points out these keystone cuts all over the world and these megalithic blocks, and it basically they look the same. You could tell that it was the same construction crew or builders or whatever.
Yeah,
and it's in the same sites where work just was stopped. It seems like people just down tools and never return. Like there's huge blocks en route from the quarry to the place where they were building, and they're still there. In the quarry, there's stuff being in the process of being cut out, and it's still there.
Yeah.
Like Ollantaytambo is like that big time. It's up above Cuzco, up in the mountains or whatever, and there are these huge, beautifully cut, like gorgeous blocks made out of granite. I mean, where the corners, the edges are like razor sharp, and they have these strange forms on them or whatever, and they're just lining the path going up to the top, and then they get, and he he complains about it because, like, of course, mainstream archaeology claims that the Inca did all of this.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, there's these huge blocks, and then right next to the huge block is this crappy rubble that's like stacked up, and he's like, what? So the Inca brought this giant block up here, and then they just put this crappy rubble right next to it.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. So if the Anunnaki were the ant people in the Grand Canyon, that kind of, I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, but the whole Grand Canyon caverns thing with the Egyptian stuff in there.
Yeah. They name all these little places around the Grand Canyon after Egyptian.
Yeah, the Temple of Isis.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there was this huge article in the Phoenix Gazette. It was like the front page article or whatever that was like, it was like Egyptian, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's basically Egyptian stuff found in the Grand Canyon, right? And it tells the story of this guy named G. Kincaid, I think his name was. He was a prospector. He was floating down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon, looking up on the cliffs on either side for signs of minerals, so because he was a prospector. And supposedly he sees like these stains coming down the cliff on the rock or whatever. So he stops, and then manages to climb up there. And as he climbs up, he realizes that there's a ledge there that he couldn't see from down in the boat. It's way up there. Mm-hmm. And when he pulls himself up on the ledge, he realizes that like over off to the right, there's actually some steps coming up, right? And the ledge is flat, and there's a door, like a portal, like a archway door going down into the rock. And he was like, to him, it looked like this used to be a wharf. This was the water level.
Oh, yeah.
Right, the steps,
you pulled your boat
the steps went down into the water, which was now 1,000 feet below where he was, right? So yeah, so according to the story, and remember, again, this is like front page major newspaper in Arizona, right?
Yeah.
They tell the story of how this guy went into the caves, whatever, and found all of these strange artifacts. Like he found huge rooms full of mummies that were really tall, 8-10 feet, wrapped up or whatever, all male. He found a room full of weapons that were made of, he said that they were made of copper of some kind, but these people obviously had the secret of hardening copper.
Yeah.
He said that he saw like figures that looked like Buddha, like these. He said that they look like Buddhist or Hindu figures or whatever. Have all the arms and it's made of gold or whatever, and there's all this stuff around it. And he said there were crystals all over the floor and like cat's eye agates, and he said that one of the tunnels that he was going down that tunnel and it got dark and dank and he said it smelled snaky, and so he stopped going down that way.
He smelled snaky.
That's right. It smelled snaky.
Oh man, whenever it smells snaky, you gotta go there.
That's right.
Check it out.
Snake Bros. Yeah, so it's a really interesting story, and we can come back to it. We take a break. We are at 30 minutes, buddy.
No, we're not.
We're not?
Nope.
Whoa. Hallucination.
Now we're at 30 minutes.
Oh, it's 3.
Yeah. 3.
We'll
Snake break.
Snake break.
I know where you're going with this. I got this. Brothers of the Serpent, we're always going somewhere, no matter the tangents. Because we hail from the 10 by 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 10 tangent cube of science.
Snakes.
Bros.
Well, I'm glad you know where I'm going with this because I don't know where I'm going with this.
No, I'm following you. I'm slithering right behind you, man.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I don't remember all the names. I remember G. Kincaid was the name of this prospector, but there was also a doctor named, like an archaeologist, and he was said to be with the Smithsonian, and supposedly he brought out a whole team of people, and like basically the newspaper article was just like full of all this, like there were so many details, and then it was like explaining how the Smithsonian was coming, and they were going to like, you know, they were sending an expedition out there, and they were going to get all these artifacts, and they were going to figure everything out, and they were going to like translate the hieroglyphs, and there's one follow-up story that shows up a couple of days later, and then that's it. It kind of just disappears. And
But they actually did find the place again.
supposedly it's there.
Because I vaguely remember hearing this story and then hearing that it was basically like this guy's claims or whatever, and then when they went back to, they could never find the place and all that kind of shit.
Right. So it's not. It's not anybody's claims. Like the first thing that people had a hard time with was like tracking down these names. Like the Smithsonian claims that there was never any such doctor, whatever his name was.
Yeah.
But people have dug through like old publications, like the reports to the Bureau of Ethnology or whatever. These huge 500-page. You know, like incredibly boring to read, but sometimes with interest. So they dig through these or whatever, and they have found references to this guy, this doctor, you know, references to his name or whatever. But the Smithsonian, the institution, claims that they never had this a doctor of that name work for them.
They're notorious for claiming they have no idea what's going on.
Right. Yeah. So Kincaid actually disappears. Like he like after this, unlike previous to that, he was kind of a colorful guy, right? So he was sort of well known in the area because he was, I don't know, he was like a weird, you know, bushy bearded prospector dude. So whenever he came into town, he was kind of a like a little bit of a carnival, like a sideshow. He was just, you know, loud and crazy or whatever. And so, but after this, he just vanishes. Like he completely disappears from records, and so does anything having to do with any kind of excavation, or not an excavation, but like expedition to this place. But supposedly people know where the entrance is, but it's in a place, number one, that's off limits. Like,
Of course.
right. So in the Grand Canyon National Park, the area where this is like a place where no one goes. Like there's no trails there or whatever, and like supposedly it's off limits because, you know, it's really dangerous, right? And they don't let people just float down the river anymore, like Kincaid was doing. He was in a boat, like going down the Colorado, and he had gotten into this area where it was basically straight stone cliffs coming up out of the water on either side of it. He was in this deep canyon, So they don't let people go there anymore. But people have gone to the area from the top, right? So instead of going down the river, they've found it by walking along the edge of the canyon and figuring out where it is to drop down. And it's like halfway from the top or halfway up from the bottom. It's like
half a mile.
Yeah. And it's in an incredibly remote area, but I don't know personally whether the entrance has truly been found, but like they supposedly know where it is. I don't know if anybody's dropped down there and tried to get in because it's 1,000 feet below the rim of the canyon.
Drones.
Yeah. That would be cool. It's pretty. The wind crap is pretty crazy in the canyon there, but also it's supposedly a reservation land or something. I don't know if it's in the park or not, but like I know that there's the Navajo and the Hopi, and they kind of like sort of rival. They have this rivalry thing or whatever. The Hopi are like, no, that's our place, bitch. Like we came out of the ground right there, and the Navajo are like, no, we took this place because like we have Mohawks and shit or whatever. I don't, there's a big fight over it, and anyway, so but like. So what was this? Like, was it a true story? Like, most people are like, well, it was a newspaper hoax. But newspaper hoaxes aren't usually full spread front page in major newspaper. You know what I mean? Like,
fake news.
Yeah. They've always been fake news. But when you read the story, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. When you read the story, it just doesn't look like. It doesn't look like it's fake. There's all of these details, and it's told very matter-of-factly. Like, usually when I've come to recognize, especially fake archaeology stories, you can tell by the names, because the person who's writing it gives everybody some joke name, Like, well, I have one example that's not a fake story, but the name was a joke name, and it was R.C. Christian.
Yeah.
Which is like Rosicrucian. But so when you go and you read like, oh, they found like crazy freaking 30-foot tall giants, and they were buried with like millions of women slaves, and they had humongous axes made of crystals and stuff like that, and they give the people who are all supposedly working on it all these crazy ridiculous names. It's like two initials and then the last name, and it always says something.
Harry Potter style.
Yeah. Yeah.
Newt Scamander.
Yeah.
So, I remember going to the Grand Canyon and seeing all of the Egyptian names on there, and then hearing whoever the guide was like, oh yeah, so there was somebody who claimed to have found like some Egyptian artifacts here, and that's been
it's totally debunked.
Disproven. It's bunk. Blah 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 blah. But where I think you were going with this, everything really is that, and what I think is that there was somebody here in the Americas, in South America, in Egypt, in like all over these places all over the world. These megalithic sites, they're too similar.
That's right.
All the way they were built, the building style is too similar in so many different ways. Keystone cuts being one of them. The
heterogeneous, the Cyclopean,
building style, very much the same. The astronomy, the astronomical things about the sites are so similar everywhere, including the Serpentine Mound.
Yeah, and then the lizards and the snakes that they would put, the snake and lizard forms that they would put in high relief onto this.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the stone structures in the Northeast, the giants, all that kind of stuff. There's so much evidence, and it's evidence in like real evidence of the actual structures themselves and the building styles, and then there's like all of the legends and everything that you hear.
Right.
That, people want to easily say, it's myth, this or that, or whatever. The Hopi saying that these people came out of the ground and saved them from some cataclysm and all that. That same story is all the way down south into Central America, into South America. it's all over the world. It's over in the Middle East.
Yep.
Same stories, same legends. So where I'm thinking you're going with this is the same people, whoever they were, that
Exactly
were doing
right.
this everywhere, and it was all around the same time,
Right.
which makes the Serpentine Mound too old for the
More modern indigenous people.
the more modern indigenous people that were in the area when we found it.
Yeah.
It makes these pyramids and all this crazy shit down in Central America too old for the people that supposedly claim to build it and then sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people on top of it for
That's
some
right.
other purpose.
And it's actually more recently, it's actually been it's continuing to be proven that what's called the Olmec culture, which actually spans most of from in Mexico all the way down to South America, the Olmecs.
Which
And
we literally know nothing about.
Right. It wasn't identified as a separate culture until like 1940 or something like that. Basically, all these Mexican archaeologists invited all these American and British ones down, and they just started showing them all this stuff. Like, look at these things that are distinct and different. And one of the things they were finding were these humongous, like colossal basalt heads that are just like, they're just in the swamps and in the jungle. So like the people were going, it was oil exploration, right? So they're going out in the jungle or whatever, doing oil exploration. They're driving gigantic bulldozers through the jungle. And then bam, they hit this, like, what the hell is that? They get out and there's this gigantic, 60-ton head made of basalt frowning at them or whatever. Like, you ain't going nowhere, boy.
Right. And then, of course, that's just what people do. They carve heads out of massive pieces of volcanic stone like they do in Easter Island. And it's just what we do.
Yeah. And then they just leave them in the swamp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that's kind of interesting that's all over the world are these humongous stone spheres.
Yeah.
Right? So in Costa Rica, there's like, that's where the best known, like there's tons of them there. And they're just all, the same deal. They're all in the jungle. Right.
Yeah.
And they kind of like, when you look at Costa Rica or whatever, they sort of seem to be like on one coastline. Right. So they're kind of strewn throughout the jungle, closer to one coastline. So and this isn't part of, I haven't seen this in a theory or heard this in a theory or whatever, but I was looking at a kind of a map and I was like, these were put here by a wave.
No, that'd be crazy. They
were washed there by a wave. In other words, all these people trying to solve like the position, they're looking at the positions and they're like, were they constellations? Because they're all the different sizes and some of them are humongous, like 12-foot diameter.
Yeah, and the measurements on them are so ridiculously exact.
Yeah.
Spherical shapes.
Right, and stonemasons say that like making a perfect sphere is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
Especially if you're just working with your hand, if you're kind of like, well, that kind of looks like a sphere. Like, it is hard to do. Because, you can imagine if you're trying to make a 6-foot sphere. Well, how do you make it perfectly round? How do you wrap a string around?
Look at it from every single angle.
Right. You wrap a string around it and you're like, okay, so right there it's the circumference is right, and then you roll the string around and you're like, shit, it gets too long, and then it gets too short, it gets too long. So how do you fix it? But these are perfect. They are, when you look at them,
they're machined.
Yeah. They look like they were rolled and cut, but and so like unlike most megaliths, these are easy to move. You can just kind of roll them along. Well, unless you have to go up a hill.
Yeah.
Or they're in a marsh, which is often. But
still breathing.
These are also found all over the world. I found this out. There's one stone sphere on Easter Island. And it's in this weird, like, it's a little, it looks like a little protected, like, box canyon. It's very small, right? And there's kind of these natural rock walls or whatever, and the sphere is just sitting in the middle of that. And the islanders will tell you that is the most sacred item on the entire island.
Yeah.
And it's just this single little 3-foot stone sphere, right? They have all these humongous heads all over the place, but no, this little sphere is the most sacred item. And then what's also interesting is in LA in the early 1900s in Santa Monica, they were making the electric trolley, right? So they were they were basically laying the tracks for the electric trolley in LA and in Santa Monica. And because it's an electric trolley, it can only have a certain grade, right? It can't go up 2 steep hills.
Right.
So they had this huge steam shovel, old school backhoe or whatever, this huge steam shovel, and they were basically cutting through this hill to make the trolley line, and the hill just breaks open, and like hundreds of stone spheres come rolling out of it. I mean, like hundreds and hundreds. There's a picture of it. There's an old magazine black and white photo, and you see the huge steam shovel and the hills right there, and there's just all these stone balls that come rolling out of the hills, right? And at the time, geologists and scientists basically were like, "Oh, these are dinosaur eggs." That's what they said, and no one knows what happened to them. So, the common idea is that the largest known amount of stone balls are actually in Costa Rica. That's not true. Like, there were hundreds of them in LA, in Santa Monica.
How big were they?
They were all sizes. I mean, like when you look at the steam shovel, it's this huge, gigantic backhoe, and some of the balls are big, and there's just like hundreds of them come rolling out of this hill. Like, so what was the hill? That's the other question. Like, I think
it was a giant ancient rabbit shit.
Yeah. That's right. It was a
fossilized.
It was a corporalite, or whatever it's called, like the fossilized shit.
The megalo rabbit. It is the rabbit.
That's right. The American Pleistocene megalo rabbit.
It's got huge
stone balls.
It can leap like.
What behind the rabbit? It is the rabbit. Yeah, so and again, like, no one knows what happened to them. I mean, like, they obviously weren't dinosaur eggs.
The thing about all of this makes me sick is when Hernan Cortez came over here and freaking burned. They went through and just like burned all these freaking books.
Yeah.
That probably
explained a lot of
we're
that stuff.
recording all
same
of this.
deal with the Library of Alexandria. They're just like, burn all that stuff. We don't need it. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things, like,
that's why you make your books.
Kind of changing the subject a little bit, but erasing history.
Yeah.
For whatever, how do you gain from that, right? Like right now, you can gain. Like Hernan Cortez is like, if I burn all this, like, our way of life right now is going to be thought of as supreme, right there.
Right, and there was the same sort of thing they did with the sacred sites. Like, you show up and you knock down their temple and put yours on the same spot, so that the people in the area will continue to come to this site because they revere it. But now it's your temple, right? With your religion and your rules and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the Spanish did that in Cuzco. They just knocked down the Temple of the Sun, and then they put a big cathedral on top of that.
Right. And there's been all through, like, you look at these ancient Egyptian carvings, and they're all like chiseled out.
Yeah. Yep. They've been redacted.
Yeah. And that just does no good, no matter where you're doing it or why you're doing it. Like.
It's some kind of short-term gain. It's not.
Yeah, it's a short-term gain. It does no good for humanity.
Right.
Ever.
Right, but it does. It's some kind of power grab for the person at the time. It's like that's what it always is.
Exactly.
You gotta do some redactions so that you can. I mean, I don't know. There's a quote from George Orwell's 1984 when he basically is talking about that. He's like. He's basically saying, like, all dates have been changed, all names have been altered, he's talking about how that's what they're doing. Like, there is no history, there is only a single eternal present in which the state is always right.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh my God, right? Just, oh God, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Went to that book once was enough.
Yeah.
Never again.
You've seen the picture of it where it's like, this was supposed to be a warning, not a manual.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some of that going on with the archaeological record here and we've talked about this before, that this idea of indigenous populations and everything, and like there's power in being the indigenous population.
Right, like they call them in Canada the First Nations. Like you can tell by the terms they choose.
Yeah. So there's other things like besides the now quote unquote debunked Egyptian connections to the Grand Canyon, but they're up in Canada. There's this place, I can't remember what the name of it is, something Providence, whatever, but it's I have to look it up. It's full of petroglyphs.
Oh yeah.
In the granite.
Yes.
And the area is, the name of it has something to do with the voices of the dead.
Yeah.
There's this river that's flowing way down underneath the rock, but the rock has these cracks that go way down into it.
Oh yeah.
And you can hear through the cracks the whisper of the water.
Man, that must be creepy.
And it's way freaking
Way
down there.
yeah.
So you can't see it, but there's all these petroglyphs all over and they're cut down into the stone. They're very deep into this granite,
and
some
even,
of them are just
even so, they're heavily worn, right?
Yeah. But they're amazing.
Yeah.
Like so many
Faces
just
and shit.
crazy alien-looking things.
Yeah.
Just wild-looking things. And then alongside them somewhere are like these Viking
Yeah.
symbols and letters. And,
Runes.
yeah, runes and stuff carved in. And they're like, okay, well, this is obviously Viking. But it's like, no.
Right.
It can't be because they couldn't have been here.
Yeah. I've wondered if the story of the Lovelock Giants are Vikings.
That was going to be my next thing that I was going to bring up because you were talking about David Hatcher Childress, and he does one of the videos I watched of his. He's like in that cave, like there were giant red-haired skeletons. Like
you kind of think like maybe the Vikings. I mean, like that's.
But I don't think they were Vikings. They were mummified. Number one.
Yeah. Because they were in a cave.
Yeah, they were mummified in sitting positions. Sitting upright.
I thought they were killed in there by smoking. Like the story is basically that the Indians like piled brush in front of the entrance and then lit it on fire and killed them all with smoke.
Right, that was the story from the Indians, which was that there was this race of giants there.
Yes.
That lived there that would like
Cannibals.
cannibals and stuff, and red-haired giants.
Yeah.
And they chase them into a cave. And
Yeah. By the way, guys, anytime you commit genocide, just call them cannibals. It works.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that story so many times. Oh yeah, they ate babies, and so we killed them all.
But really, I don't know who they were, but the point is that there's all these things in the United States, in Central America, and all over the place that are either have legends that are attached to these ancient legends from the Middle East or wherever, just like all over the place. Same story,
and they all
monomyth.
And they all have flood myths.
Right.
The same flood story. They all have. Many of them have Babel story. I mean, the Babel story from the Aztecs blew my mind. I mean, it was exactly the same thing, like building the tower, and then like destroy. Like I was just like, holy crap, that is exactly the same story.
Yep. And then you have the Sumerians, and the Sumerians wrote so much shit down, like everything. They had receipts and stuff.
Yeah.
Transactions and all.
Their receipts
of this.
were giant clay tablets. Here's your receipt.
But it's like it gives you this idea of their culture. It's like, why? Okay, so are you gonna write a receipt on a clay tablet, or was somebody documenting their lifestyle, their civilization,
the Watchers,
culture, right? In a way that they knew would be preserved, and that's a possibility. But their story, their quote unquote creation myth, and all that, like it. The connections you can draw to actual scientific data about the motions of the planets and all of this kind of stuff, like they had it down.
Yeah.
And they also just talk about these beings that show up that were doing stuff here long before they ever showed up, and then they made them and all of that, and then you got we went through the whole Adamu story, Adam and Eve, whatever, all of that stuff. So this is the big thing for me with all of these clues, right? Pieces of the riddle. If you don't look at the Sumerians and what they wrote, then you have this idea that there was this ancient civilization that preceded all of these known civilizations in our past,
and it spanned the globe.
Right, they were everywhere.
Yeah.
And also, like, with newer data coming out about the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis and all that, it makes sense about why in the whole central United States there's just nothing.
Right.
It was all wiped out by some flood, erased. But you have it on the East Coast, West Coast, and then down in the, into Central America.
Yeah.
You have all these.
And then it's buried under miles of shit. Like that cube wall underneath 2 miles of coal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or rock wall in Dallas.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at is that not looking at what the Sumerians wrote, it's like, well, there was this ancient civilization, and you can easily see or consider that it was humans who did it.
Right.
Right? That makes the most sense. It's the most probable.
Yeah.
But then you have one of the most ancient writing cultures, and all of the shit they wrote, which they were saying it was not us.
Right.
It was like these other
gods.
These that came down from the heavens.
Yeah.
But
those still could be humans. Like, they just might be a different kind. So that leads us to the longheads, the elongated skulls. Those could be the Anunnaki.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the real ones, not the ones where they were obvious. So again, like, you have head binding, which is all over the planet, right? These tribal cultures all over the world, for some reason, decided that it would be a good idea, at least the elites. Now, so it's also interesting that it's only attached to the aristocracy, the elites of the tribes or whatever. They would take their babies' heads and, like, wrap them, in rope or in some kind of cloth or whatever, and start to try to squeeze it into this cone head, into a long head. And it was a sign of. It was considered to be a sign of your elitism, that you were fit to rule, that you were one of the gods.
Right, and other cultures did this a similar thing with the necks. Like, women would put the rings on their necks and continue putting rings and just elongate their necks.
Yeah, body modification is like in China. They would fold their feet
in, make tiny feet.
Yeah, but the skull binding is strange. Like,
it's all strange.
A lot of the there was trepanation, right? So there were where they cut holes in people's skulls. A lot of the obviously bound skulls, the bound skull longheads, were trepanned at some point, and I think it might be because that the misshapen skull, like, maybe they had horrible headaches, or like somebody had to relieve the pressure. They cut a hole in their skull, Another theory is that they were going for the pineal gland somehow.
Yeah.
But it seems like they were imitating these actual long heads, which we've also found. And I found, by the way, the last time we talked about this, and I was talking about parietal plates, and you were like, "What's a parietal plate?" And I'm like, now I know what it is. So regular humans, we all have 3 skull plates. There's one in the front, which is basically your forehead, and then there's 2 in the back, and the 2 in the back meet across the top, and that makes the suture down. Those are the parietal plates.
Okay.
These long heads have 1 parietal plate. There is no suture going down the top.
Right.
But I was looking at a picture recently of one. There's one from Procus where it's enormously long.
Yeah.
But there's also one that I think is from somewhere else. I'm not sure. It might be from Procus also, but it has this frontal plate that's shaped like a triangle, right? So think of the eyebrows, and then above that it's like shaped in this sort of rounded triangle. It goes to a point way up here at the top, and then there's this single plate that makes the entire back of the head, and it's like a really weird looking skull. I mean, it's really weird looking because that plate in the front sticks out.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it like, oh man, I wonder what he'd look like. It's a weird looking guy. But So the fact that they don't have a parietal plate, or that they only have one, makes it that's not a Homo sapiens sapiens, but it's a hominid of some kind.
Right.
So if we look at the Sumerian tale, they say that these Anunnaki were here 400,000 years before, right? So they were here. So what if that's what they're talking about? A civilization of hominids, basically humans, but non-Homo sapiens humans that were very tall. Some of them were very tall and huge. Some of them had long heads, but they all had weird skulls. Like, I mean, there are ones that are like they have the cone heads, but there are also ones that are like the heads get wide in the back. They get just enormously wide. They had double our cranial capacity. And they had 6 fingers and 6 toes.
Yeah.
And so what if that's the people? And, so again, like I'm staying away from no aliens here. That these are hominids from Earth, but they're not human. But they are more intelligent than us. They might have had, I don't know, psychic powers of some kind. Like, they had this enormous brain. Maybe they had an enlarged pineal gland or whatever. Maybe they had, they had latent psychic powers. That might explain how they could float blocks. That's why wizards now are always depicted as having this peaked hat.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they're the cone head, and the wizard can do what? He can do magic by just saying things, right? So like all these legends, and also the wizards are always pictured wearing robes with stars on them, right? So they were astronomers,
Right.
Okay?
And they were also like they had the power of language, whatever
Yes.
the magical tongue, whatever it is.
That's right, the language of the birds.
So that the Tower of Babel story is like they're taking that ability away
From humans, from the Homo sapiens.
But also on top of this, like all of the hominids that have been, the fossilized human-like bones or skull pieces or whatever that have been found that are supposedly missing links. Like some of them have larger cranial capacities than we do.
Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon both had bigger brains than us.
Right, and they're supposed to be. So what if they weren't actually our predecessors, but just another species that lived?
Yeah.
And of course, it was how long ago?
Well, we already know that. I mean, I already consider the Neanderthals to not be our ancestors, but be more like cousins or brothers.
Yeah.
Because they were not directly behind us on the family tree. They were kind of next to us, and their branch stopped.
Yeah.
But there was crossover because all of us have like between 2 and 6% Neanderthal genes in us. Like actually, we get our initial, the very first layer of our immune system from Neanderthals, which causes allergies, by the way. Thanks, Neanderthals. That's where our allergies come from. But then within those Neanderthal genes, 2% of that comes from something called the Denisovans, which is a completely no one's ever found any bones of them, but they've given them a name or whatever, right? Yeah. And then I think just recently I was reading an article where they were saying like there's a ghost hominid that ancient Homo sapiens also mated with. So they found it.
Yeah. I remember reading that.
Yes, and that was a complete ghost. No one even knows anything about it. Like, so it was like a crazy freaking J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say. So we have all these legends that
We have the elves and the
we have
dwarves
all these different species of very human-like beings living alongside each other.
right.
And it was a time like each one had different types of magic or whatever that they were able to do.
Yeah.
Some worked with stone, like all badass.
Yeah,
and
the
then-
Earthborn, the Neanderthals. You could tell, like, the Neanderthals were just like, they were probably the dwarves. They weren't tall. They were like 5 feet, but they're also 5 feet wide, right? They're like 5 feet tall, and they had these enormous shoulders, and their arms were really long, and like the way that their bones were structured, they could tell that the leverage they had because of where the muscles attached is different than ours, right? So they would just have this enormous leverage with their muscles and stuff. Like their jaws were the same way. So they probably were just fantastically strong. And of course they're like stocky and short, which makes it like completely not fair if you're trying to wrestle the guy, right?
Yeah.
He's like low center of gravity, and you're like it's like trying to knock over a cube. It just it's the same thing. You knock it over, it's the same thing.
All right, we're gonna take another break. And back to talk about another break.
More connections across the world. Snakes!
Snake Ruff.
So I still don't know where I'm going with this.
Well, I know where you're going with this.
All right. Welcome back, folks. Brothers of the Serpent. It is a late night tonight. We are in the studio at what is it? It's like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. Something
1 in the
like that.
morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kicking some ass, snakes.
Kicking some ass.
snake ass. It's just a hole on a tube. It's a little sliver between scales.
That's right. So
Kick that sliver between scales.
So we were discussing the possibility of this globe-spanning civilization before all known civilizations, and
And we have evidence
everywhere.
right, but also like the evidence considered to be evidence for evolution could also actually be evidence that there were
Yes.
different people here that was their
Exactly.
civilization.
Yeah, and I mean, and then there's the problem of the, you know, the what look like unnatural alterations to the Homo sapiens genome,
Right.
and then there's the problem with the bananas.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
Nope.
Let's just face it. We've talked about cataclysms. We talked about impacts. If there's an impact powerful enough to wipe out, like pretty much all of the life forms of the time, or most of them.
Most of the big mammals, yeah.
The dinosaurs, all of that
Oh,
shit. I mean, why do we assume that there weren't intelligent beings in time, like long ago? Like the Sumerians were saying, 400,000 years ago, there were intelligent beings here building shit and doing stuff. It could all be wiped out,
Oh yeah.
and we wouldn't know.
Show me the potsherds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there.
Well, we found one tooth for this thing, and that proves evolution. But if you say, well, maybe that tooth, no, it can't possibly be that it was something
That's right.
else.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, if you
Derailed.
find teeth that make it too old, they do all these shenanigans to mess it up, like we talked about last time.
Yeah. It's just that the things that these ancient cultures knew about, namely precession,
Yeah.
to me, you know, that's how would you even notice that?
Right.
You would. I mean, we didn't notice it in
Yeah.
our modern, culture
Yeah.
until some scientists were looking at ancient texts and ancient sites, and they're like, "Holy shit! There's actually something going on here."
Yeah, and
And then they prove it.
right. I think the Greek, one of the ancient Greek guys, who is considered to be the first to consider precession, was actually getting it from ancient texts.
Right.
And we learned it from the Greek guy.
So we can't say. Well, what can we say? How long would it have taken us to notice it if we didn't have any references to it anywhere? We might have figured it out by now.
Yeah, computers.
Probably would have figured it out by now.
Yeah,
in the
with
computer
computers.
age.
But so that's the other question is like, did they so if we're gonna say that they're advanced, like, what do we mean by that? Were they advanced like us? Well,
that's
if
what I'm
you
saying.
read the Brahmana Shasta, yes.
Yeah, they were. Right. That's what I'm saying. There's this tendency to say, well, if they figured out precession, they must have done it by standing up big stones and looking at it for generations and generations and
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah.
Whereas we wouldn't have figured it out until the computer age.
Right.
So why? And there is one ancient computer.
Right.
That we know of.
They're a mechanism.
Yeah.
And guess what? It was an astronomical computer.
Exactly. So I think for me, like, really the thing that I've been just continually blown away by is the lengths at which whoever these intelligent beings went to preserve what knowledge they had.
Right.
Through what cataclysms they went through. I mean, even the oral tradition.
Yep.
The stories associated with
the very concept of the oral tradition. Like there's this. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there's this idea that oral histories are kind of, they're not really considered scientific or trustworthy or whatever. But when you actually do anthropological work and dig into the concepts of the oral tradition, like, it is rigorous. Like, you as the shaman, knowing all the oral traditions, right? You know all the stories of the tribe. You know all of them. You pick your pupil and you school him for like 20 years until he can repeat those stories verbatim, exactly. I mean, they put great emphasis into like the ability to like repeat these stories exactly right. Like, there were no mistakes allowed because they understood that would cause a creeping destruction. Right. So the idea, just the like Western idea that oral histories are untrustworthy. It's bullshit. It's understandable, but not understandable anymore. It's understandable initially because you're like, well, okay, so you guys have been telling each other stories. But as soon as you sort of sit down and get to know the tribe and you find out, like, wait, okay, so you're the storyteller guy, and you were trained by your predecessor for 20 years to tell these stories exact, and you're doing the same thing with your pupil now, and you guys have been doing that for thousands and thousands of years. Okay, well, I will believe that your stories are like unchanged then. I mean, but that's not what happened. Like, they're still considered myths, and the reason they're considered myths is because their contents are unpalatable. They don't fit with the standard model.
Yeah, exactly. So that whole idea is, I've been fascinated by the idea of the parable. I know I've talked about this before, but this, like, a way of preserving some real scientific knowledge, whether it is of our history, things that happen, astronomical things, or things that have happened to Earth, or entire civilizations that fell and came back and fell and came back, or whatever.
Yeah.
But being put in terms that are relevant to some group of people in a society at the time, whatever time that may be, telling them that story, so it's something that they can relate to.
Like the sword and the stone.
Yeah, exactly. And
they're hiding metallurgy and all. Yeah.
Right, but you make it this story that's like really cool, and, and so they want to tell it. They love the story. They tell it again. They tell it again. They tell it to their kids, and it may change. Those types of stories can change.
Yeah.
The fundamental elements of the story will not.
Right.
Even if one of them is a farmer and the next one they're builders or whatever. You can change whatever the sort of. You can change the analogy, right, to different things, but it maintains its.
But there are like, the story falls apart without certain pieces in it, and so those pieces will be retained because the story is the people telling the story want it to be good, right?
Right.
You need to have the stone and the sword and the boy and the wizard, right? So those will all be there in some form or another.
Yeah. So it's a language in the form of symbols.
Right.
Symbolism, I should say, not symbols. Symbolism.
Right. That's right. And that is it. Like, some legends are saying that this symbolic language is the Babel that was lost.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Another idea is that Sumerian itself is the lost language, is the one that was destroyed at Babel. Because Sumerian, this is what's fascinating about Sumerian, it has no connection linguistically to any other known language. But every other known language, wait, that's not entirely correct, but I'll get back to that in a minute. Every other known language in the world is connected to some other language. in the world except for Sumerian. They all, you can see where this one came from that one and this one came from that one. And the same thing with writing. The writing, you know, you got linear A and linear B, and then the alphabet, and then like you got the hieroglyphs, and like, you know, you can see the connections. You got in Japan, they have the kanji and the katakana, and the, you know, and those connect to the Chinese hieroglyphs, which are symbolic. All that stuff there's connections everywhere. But Sumerian seems to stand alone, except recently they've connected to Aymara.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. Now, Aymara, I think the reason why it's taken so long for the connection to be made is Aymara is still a living language. It's still spoken.
That's right.
And there's no writing associated.
Guess where it's spoken?
In Peru, yeah.
In Bolivia. Which is where that bowl is from.
That's right.
Holy shit.
That's right. And so Sumerian's a dead language. No one knows what it sounds like. We have our equivalents that, you know, and people can speak it, but they don't. It's like the ancient Egyptian. Like, no one actually knows if that's what it sounds like.
Right.
But Aymara might be what it sounds like, or something very similar.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how the Aymara language is like this perfect mathematical, like it was obviously constructed.
Yeah.
From whole cloth, like somebody like sat down and was like, I'm going to design this spoken language.
Yeah, this is the language that basically like Google Translate uses.
Right, it translates everything into that.
Uses, but yeah, every language can be translated to Aymara, and then Aymara can be translated to another language.
Right,
like
by a computer because it's mathematical.
Right.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So Sumerian might be the lost, and it's I can never remember the word. It's agglutinative or something like that. The way Sumerian is structured is it was with syllables rather than
right. And that's what I thought I was going to say. Like they figured out the way they broke the codec, I guess is the way you say it, or whatever it is, for the cuneiform writing, was figuring out what they were symbolizing. Yeah. Like what the arrangements symbolize, and they figured out it was like syllabic or whatever.
Yeah.
Fast.
Agglutinative. Yeah, but there's a Proto-Sumerian hieroglyphic text, and then that eventually becomes the cuneiform, which is like a very, 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 very extremely stylized version of the hieroglyphics.
Right.
So they were able to, and hieroglyphics is concept-based, right? Like you have like a dude and a tree and an axe, and you're like, that's a bad guy, right? But in cuneiform, there's no visible dude or tree and an axe. But if you look at the hieroglyphs and you look at the cuneiform next to them, you can kind of see how they got there.
Right.
Right. They started laying things down or standing things up that were laid down before or whatever, and then they put little flags on them and shit and like.
Yeah.
So they were able to kind of work it out that way, but it is weird how it's constructed in that it's like, whereas most languages are like either it's a whole word or a whole concept or whatever, or like our alphabet, individual sounds like ah or ke, you know, or t, right? They didn't do that. They had te and me and amu, ni, no, mo, you know, like all these syllables, right? And that's how they wrote. And there's no other language like that. Like I thought Japanese was like that for a while, but it's not. Like they use the for their their full on writing. They use all the symbols. There's 50,000 of them or something like that of the kanji.
Yeah.
Like it's supposedly in Japan, it takes you have to have like a college degree to be able to read the newspaper because like it's written in kanji or whatever. But you know, one of our friends from Japan told me like, oh well, most of the time, like, so if you're reading comics, they'll have the kanji in there because they look badass. But next to the kanjis, they'll have the little alphabetic symbols that spell out basically what the kanji says,
so that you can say it, so that you know what it
means. You're like, yeah. Toto, hime, oh, okay. And then you know what and then you know what the kanji is. Yeah. She told me that was how she was like, I learned kanji by reading comics because they have the kanji there and then the thing next to it, and then you start to recognize the kanji. Mm-hmm. But there's 50,000 of them, like I said. And they can mean different things if they're next to different guys. But sometimes Sumerian was interesting. Sometimes Sumerian was written in I've only heard it. They say as you plow, right? So basically, it goes left to right, right to left, left to right,
okay.
right to left, right, which is weird. It's like it says snake.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's like none of this like skipping back to the beginning. You just like keep going back and you back and forth. There's no wasted eye movement.
Yeah, you don't have to push the little thing on the typerator to push it over to the. Yeah, it just hits the other side, and the worm gear turns the other way, and it goes across the other direction. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So Rongo Rongo is written that way. The Harappan script is written that way. I think one of the Phoenician scripts is written that way too. So you have. And Sumerian isn't always written like that, but it is depending on what they were writing on. So like when you see those huge, like the tablets, and it's got the picture of the guys on the the weird. There's the Anunnaki on the right. There's this weird glowing ball, and there's the like 3 humans and stuff, and they're doing something strange, and there's just like billions of like cuneiform letters all over it. I think those are vertical, or I don't even know, but they don't. That doesn't do the whole.
Left,
you can tell when it goes left to right because they put them in troughs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They have borders on top and bottom.
Yeah. So another thing, this was I was looking at semaphore. You know what that is? Semaphore.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Navy they have like a full semaphoric language, and like when you look at it, it's a dude with flags.
Oh, okay.
And I'm looking at the Rongo Rongo, and I'm like, that's what that is. These were ancient mariners.
Yeah, that's what they look like, little dudes.
They look like little dudes doing making little poses. It's semaphore. Like you could speak this language with your body. Like
oh, that's badass.
So like ship to ship, this is how you talk, right? With the flags.
Holding the flags with your arms.
Yeah, well that's how we do it, but like I don't know how they did it, but like what I'm saying is like when you look at all these little guys in the Harappan script, it's actually a semaphoric, I think.
Semaphoric means that you can do it with your body.
Yeah, semaphore means
so like sign language.
Yeah, but it's full body, like
right.
Yeah, semaphore means like it takes the whole body. Yeah, like you see the guys like at the airport, they've got the glowing sticks or whatever, and they're doing all this stuff. That's semaphore, right? And those, it's actually they're talking to the pilots with that shit.
Badass.
They're not just saying that. They're not just saying come this way. They're like you're going down runway 4.
It'd be funny like one of those dudes with the glow sticks just starts raving.
Yeah, the planes are
like oh dude, he's doing snake semaphore.
That's right. Planes all start crashing into each other. So yeah, like it. Again, it makes sense to me because I'm looking at this semaphore language and it's our Navy, and then I'm thinking like, oh yeah,
they were seafarers.
Right. They were ancient mariners.
Well, yeah, you got Easter Island, which is out in the middle of the freaking Pacific.
Right. Exactly. And
that's where the Rongo Rongo was found.
Right. And then the Harappan civilization was on that humongous river that was like post ice. It was Himalayan glacial melt. It's all dry now, but it used to be this like ridiculous raging torrent that went down through India, and there's like ancient dried up dead villages all the way down this riverbed that's now gone. By the way, I don't know if we talked about this, but Mohenjo-Daro and the Harappan city there, like when they
wait, where?
In Pakistan / India.
Okay.
The Harappan civilization, the Indus Valley people.
Yeah.
When they first found it, like the city is made out of millions and millions of ceramic bricks, like these very beautifully made. It looks very Sumerian, like the Sumerian, let us make bricks.
Yeah.
Right. It's made out of just shitloads of bricks, and it was and once they uncovered the whole city, they could tell that it was, I don't know what the word is, but it didn't grow organically like all of our cities have, like where somebody comes and like built a house there and then somebody else builds a house there. And somebody builds a skyscraper. They
designed it like before they started building
it was designed complete and then built complete with with apartments and pools and baths and plumbing and everything, and so there was no stuff added on here. No one was doing homeowner modifications, right?
Yeah.
It was just like somebody came and built the entire city. So what that makes me think of like a base, like this is what you do with a prefab.
Yeah, but that sounds like the Anunnaki, like the story of the Anunnaki. They come here and they're like, okay, we can live here, like it's hospitable, and so then they decide they're gonna bring shitloads of them over here. And so one guy, Enki, is like, goes down there and designs like the whole place. He builds dams and all this kind of shit.
Right.
He gets all of the waterworks going, and then everybody shows up, and here's where the barracks are, and here's where this is going to be. It's all laid out beforehand.
Right. So I think that's fascinating because, like I said, the Anunnaki were treating this as this was like a forward operating base. They came here as an expedition, and Enki was like preparing for the full expedition. He had the scouts, the 50 dudes, and he built this enormous complex. And they're rattling around in it for a while until all the other Anunnaki show up and fill it up, right? Yeah. And so it's like a military base. Like you send a crew out there and they build this enormous structure that has all this stuff in it or whatever, and it's all planned out, and the whole thing has a purpose. The city itself has a purpose, whereas like, what's LA's purpose? It's just most of our cities don't have like. I don't
know, man. Like. So yeah, going back
building cities before it was cool.
Going back to what you were saying in the first segment, where is it? In South America, where the big things that look like smelting.
Yeah, the Silisani towers. Yeah,
they're big cylinders with no door.
Right.
That people climbed up on the side of and threw their bodies in there, so that they're burials.
They've like stacked up rubble and built a rubble ramp.
Yeah.
So that they could throw the bodies down at the top, and it's obviously the same people built the ramp.
So, you were talking about that other place, Tiwanaku, which is near Pumapunku.
Yeah, they're about a mile.
Pumapunku is like also the stones are all just thrown around everywhere, but the way they're made, they look like keystones. Like you know what I mean? Like the keystone. You imagine the keystone cut makes this sort of little interlocking link that holds.
You're talking about the H blocks.
Yeah, they designed these blocks that look like they can slide. You slide one massive block down, and it sort of fits like dovetail inside another block.
Yeah, I watched a video of how they go together. Holy crap!
Yeah,
and each individual H block is like
they're freaking huge.
They're like 10, 20 tons or whatever. But like you have an H standing there, and then the next H slides down and it goes halfway down and locks.
Right.
And then the other one goes halfway in, and like so they were showing like what this wall must have looked like. Like holy crap.
Yeah, it's freaking badass.
Enormous, like just
Right. So you can imagine, and they look machined. Like the stones look machined,
and they're identical to each other.
Right. So that place had a purpose. Like when you're building something. Something like in a factory or a refinery or something like that.
Yeah.
The whole place is engineered.
Yes.
Whereas, say, for the purpose of whatever it's going to be.
Right.
So all of the structural aspects of the quote unquote building, if it's going to be, a plant of some type, the walls aren't going to be made out of 2x4s. If they're going to be like
blast-proof,
hauling massive containers full of molten metal.
Right. Yeah.
They're going to be made incredibly powerful structurally. Or if it was a nuclear power plant, you're going to have like these incredibly thick walls around this certain thing. So the whole structure is engineered based on what it was for.
Right.
So a living space. We've got some 2x4s and some random shit.
Yeah, the engineering is based on what the purpose of the structure is, and then what the environment of the structure is.
Right. So I'm thinking like a house is obviously whenever you're building anything, you engineer it based on like what it's going to be used for. But when you're building a house for someone to live in, you engineer the structure based on its own weight.
Yeah.
Right. And then the forces on the of nature around it, like you don't want it to fall down in the wind, so whatever. You build it in this way where you engineer the 2x4s to be so long, and then in a place where there's going to be a load bearing, where the load of the roof is going to be, you put thicker vertical boards,
Yeah.
more of them to hold it up, and you put them together in a certain way.
Right.
But it's mainly like the whole structure is designed just to sort of hold itself up.
Right. It needs to hold itself together and not fall apart. Yeah.
Right. But if you're building something to do something, like to do some type of work, you build the walls not just to hold themselves up, but to also carry the loads of
Right, so-
whatever type of shit you're doing in there. Or
So if you're making a studio, you build the walls, you build a cube, and then you put another cube inside of it so that it has a
Right.
dead space, and so like you wouldn't do that with a regular house,
Right.
But you put a dead space in it, and you kind of float it in there or whatever, so that as a studio it like deadens all the outside noise, and then
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to get to. Like, there's no reason to build like these massive interlocking blocks. It just, out of andesite or whatever they're cut out of. It's like ridiculously hard
andesite,
stuff.
diorite, yeah.
So it seems, and then the way they're machined, it looks like they're machined with all these sharp angles and all
Yeah.
this kind of stuff. It's like, this is part of a machine.
Right, it was the machine.
But I was going to go back to the idea of smelting. Like, you were talking about those big towers, the cylindrical towers.
Yeah,
being, like,
big
smelted.
furnaces.
We had also talked about that massive copper mine that's like in Chicago somewhere or whatever.
Michigan.
Huge freaking copper mine, and no one knows where any of the copper is, and they're like calculating it's some ridiculous amount that would take 1,000 men, like 1,000 years to get it all out of it.
10,000 man, 1,000 years, something like that. Yeah.
And that's
Because they are imagining 10,000 butt flaps, though.
true.
You have to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, but then we have the stories of when the Spanish got over here, and the who was it, the Aztecs or the
Inca.
Inca.
Yeah.
Sorry. We're just like, oh yeah, keys to the city, and check out, here's a field of golden corn, and just like everything, they built all this gold, and they were like, here you go, like we got this gold for you. Meanwhile, Sumerian texts laying buried in the desert
Yeah.
say, so the Anunnaki came here for gold and taught us how to, work with metals and do all this shit and
Yeah.
get gold for them.
Right.
So there's like all of this metallurgy going on in
Yeah.
ancient times.
And they were just making artifacts with it and then setting them in the temples and leaving them there. Like in South America, they didn't actually value gold. They didn't use it for anything.
Exactly.
But they had enormous amounts of it, and it was because they all were kind of like cooperating and working in these mines and getting gold out, and then making little pretty things with them, and then standing them up in the temple for the gods to come get them eventually.
Right. And there's artifacts of like you were saying, the hardened copper. Mm-hmm. And the stuff they were doing with copper that were just like, what? How is
Yeah,
this
and then
done?
they were making orichalcum, which no one knows what that is anymore. It's probably a mix of copper and gold.
Right. So it's crazy how all of this stuff just lines up with this seemingly insane Sumerian tale.
Right. And again, going to the Vedic texts in India, the Vimana Shastra talks about Vimanas. And it's weird because when you read the Mahabharata, or you're reading the Rig Veda or whatever, the Ramayana, they're telling these stories of and they kind of read like crazy science fiction, like or James Bond, like Buck Rogers or whatever. They're getting in their flying machines and they're going up there and they're having huge aerial battles and they're destroying all this shit.
Yeah.
But the authors, they'll tell you, so Rama got in his Vimana and flew up into the air, and then he was fighting his rival, and they were shooting missiles at each other. Not missiles, but they were shooting fire arrows or whatever. But they don't really take the time to explain Vimanas to you. And it's kind of like when you're reading a novel now. If you're reading about James Bond, and it says that James Bond goes to the airport and he gets in an airplane, the author doesn't bother to tell you what an airplane is because he assumes you know because you're part of this culture. It reads the same way in these, that the authors of these ancient texts were assuming that their readers knew what Vimanas were, and they understood what they looked like and how they worked. So
But also there are like basically manuals on how to be the pilot of a Vimana or
the
whatever.
Vimana Shasta, which they found in a library somewhere, it was buried or whatever. They started to translate it, and it was basically a manual for Vimanas, how to operate it, all the, I mean, like, it's
There's
ridiculous.
ridiculous stuff about like the diet of the person that's going to be flying in it. It's like you need to be doing this type of exercise for a while, and
Right.
you need to only eat this type
Only
of
eat bananas
stuff.
and rice, yeah.
Yeah, so like wondering, well, what kind of flight were they doing? Because astronauts do the same thing.
Yeah.
like they go on this rigorous diet before they go up into space.
Yeah, and it says that there's 3 basic kinds of vimanas. One that takes you from place to place on Earth, one that takes
Right.
you from planet to planet, and one that takes you between the stars.
That's right.
And I confirmed this with our Indian gas station guy here. His name is Sunil. I went in there, I was like, so what's up with vimanas, bro? He's like, oh, you have to control them with your mind. I was like, God damn it. Can we build one? No, we can't. We're in the Kali Yuga. We can't operate them. I was so pissed. I was like, bro, we got the plans. I got the Mercury. Let's do it. Nope, control them with your mind. Crap.
Yeah, but that's another thing. Like these different ages. Like this goes back to the magic.
The Yugas,
idea. Yeah, the Yugas. We've talked about magic and how there was apparently this period where people could do all of this type of stuff. We were just talking about it being maybe the Anunnaki or the Longheads that had these mental abilities. But what if it was something else? What if it was environmental?
Right. This took me a long time to come to grips with. When I first started, not first, but when I was getting online, I was getting involved in Facebook groups with all these archaeological, and I didn't know at the time how.
Shit, we're way over time.
No,
Sorry.
We're way over time. Well, hold that thought, folks. I'll explain to you how Facebook taught me about the Yugas. Snake Rose.
We're back for the final segment of Brothers of the Serpent from the 10x10x10 Tangent Cube of Science, high atop the dusty bones of an ancient seabed on the Edwards Plateau.
Stone bones.
That's right. Coming to you not live, with half our pyramids tied behind our backs, just to make it square.
And stone balls.
That's right.
So I was talking about how I was getting, I got involved. I hated Facebook, but then I found out that they had Facebook groups. And some of these Facebook groups were like called Ancient Mysteries or Open-Minded Archaeologists. And I was like, yeah, that's me, man. So I joined up with all these different groups or whatever. And like, I mean, I ended up, I was totally friends with Klaus Dona on Facebook. I talked to Jesus Gamara, who's the guy that
Neil Stevenson.
yeah I talk to Neil Stevenson on Twitter all the time. What's his name? I can never remember any of their names, but like a lot of the dudes that are on Ancient Aliens, I totally was up friends with them on Facebook and talked to them all. They were in the groups.
Hell yeah.
You know, and I didn't know it at the time. I'm bitching them out. You know, I'm like, that's retarded. Come on, man. Like, and I find out, I see him on Ancient Aliens. I'm like, holy shit. I told that guy he was a dumbass. He's still a dumbass. Why did he say that? So in one of these groups, I would get it. We were always debating stuff, and it was always a lively debate. And a lot of these Facebook groups like sort of formed because of the Baltic Sea anomaly. If anybody remembers that thing. The
Millennium Falcon
on the
the
Baltic
ocean.
Sea. Yeah. So I was totally friends with those guys, the guys that were on the ship that found it. We were the sort of the first to sort of form the group of the Baltic Sea anomaly and to discuss it or whatever. And for a lot of people that were joining these groups, that was their very first. They had never looked at any ancient mysteries, and I already knew a shitload about ancient mysteries because I had been studying them or whatever. So like I was blowing people's minds. Like I would upload these huge, like albums, because in the groups you can post pictures as an album or whatever, put descriptions on each one. And that's what people love me for, because I would go in there just like, so megaliths all over the world, bam, just post this enormous picture album of all these, and then people would click it through like, holy shit, you know. Or I'd make connections across like look how these like Easter Island guys have these weird long fingers, and then go back to Tepe, they have these weird long fingers, and people are like, oh my god, like, you know,
It's fucking awesome.
and then I see that stuff on Ancient Aliens later, and I'm like, I wonder if they got that idea from me. But like,
Totally stolen.
totally still, but so of course that also brought me into contact with people who had knowledge about cultures that I didn't have knowledge about. Like Indian culture is difficult to, you know, there's just not a lot of stuff to, you know, to like, if you're trying to like understand the Hindu stuff, and they've got like, you see these humongous murals and there's like millions of people on them, and you're just like, I don't get it. You know something enormous is happening in this mural, but you're just like, I don't know who anybody is. They all look like they're fighting. It looks like a riot.
Yeah.
So there were people that understood that stuff, and so I'd be like, okay, so what is this? What is this fucking wheel? Like, what is this temple of Karnak? The wheels and shit.
Oh my god.
Right? And the guy, and so I had the concept of the yugas explained to me, and I totally skirp-tarted it. I mean, just skirp-tarted it the first time. I was like, come on, like seriously, like. How is this gonna? How do we get smarter? Because what are you talking about? Because basically the idea of the yugas is that there's this big cycle, and it I think the most credible one is connected to the Great Year, right? So the Greeks had it too. So you have the Great Year, and the Greeks named the ages by metals, which Western civilization is more familiar with. So you had the Gold Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. But it's actually a Hindu, it's an Indian idea, and it's called the Yuga cycle, and it's like the Kali Yuga, the Satya Yuga. I can never remember all the names, but right now we're supposed to be in the Kali Yuga, which is the Iron Age, which is the worst one, which is great. You know, I'm just like, great. Like, why do I have to be born in the worst age? Like, this is lame. But the idea is that in the Iron Age, like each age is sort of defined by our level of consciousness and understanding, right? I don't, like it's your vibrations,
Yeah.
right? And as the age grow, if we go from iron into bronze, so we go into the next age, then our vibrations raise to the 5th level or whatever, and you can understand more. So the idea is in the Iron Age that people only understand material. That's it. The material things are all that are comprehended by humankind. When you get into the Bronze Age, then we understand material and energy, so matter and energy, which is that's kind of where we are now. We're actually at the cusp of the iron to bronze. We're moving into the bronze, the age of Aquarius, right?
Yeah. So if you're talking about precession, the starting and ending point of the precessional cycle is what we were talking about before, the sun.
Yeah.
Appearing to
transit
cross
the center
of the galaxy.
Right. So we're moving from the lowest age in the cycle, according to like all the Hindu sages. I don't know if they judge it the same way.
Right, but I was just trying to draw the connection.
Yeah. So we're moving into, like, according to the Great Year, we're moving into the age of Aquarius. But according to the sort of the Yuga, the Hindu Yuga cycle, we're moving out of the Kali Yuga, which is the past 2,000 years. And you can kind of look back and see, the Dark Ages, the primitive, like Rome falls, and then you just have 2,000 years of just, it fucking sucks, right? We have, like, it's the Dark Ages, and
wow,
right? So Rome was actually the previous Bronze Age. Okay, that Rome was a high society. I mean, like, they were probably a lot more advanced than we give them credit for. You can look at the stuff they have, like their aqueducts are still working, and so we're moving back into the Bronze Age, out of the Kali Yuga. Thank God. I would have been really mad if it's like, you find out that you got another 100 years to go to get out of the Kali. I was like, God damn it. So, and you can kind of see the connection. So according to the Hindu, the Indian, like the Brahmins or whatever, the way the yugas work is the Kali Age is understanding of material only, and you can see that, like, in the past, it was people understood just like brute matter, and that's it. We fought each other with like like wailing on each other with like, you know, sharpened sticks and shit. Right, that's all there. But now we're moving into the understanding of the Bronze Age, which is matter and energy, and so we have physics, and we have like electricity, and we have fucking nuclear power, and we're starting to like understand that the universe is constructed of energy, and that the stuff that we think is matter is actually just like frozen forms of this energy. Right.
Can't do this just yet.
The Silver Age, which will be in another 4,000 years, because each age is Kali Yuga, thank God, is the shortest, but the Bronze Age is twice as long as the iron, and then the silver is twice as long as the bronze, and then the gold is twice as long as all that. So the gold is the longest age. Okay.
Wow, that's a wonderful world.
Yeah, and it's this and
it's got to be bullshit.
And this is why you get the idea of the golden age.
Yeah.
Okay. The previous golden age would have been 12,000 years ago, pretty much exactly when all these giant megaliths were being built.
Yeah, and pretty much that was the end of it too.
Right, it ended. So in the Facebook groups, when these people are telling me I'm like, okay, so explain the Yugas to me, and they would explain this to me of this concept that we move into the Bronze Age, and then we kind of like get smarter and we gain an understanding. And it isn't because we're doing science. It's actually that science, our science and our gaining an understanding is actually a product of the Yugas. It's not the other way around, right? We're not.
Yeah. It's our environment,
right?
Whatever. Like,
yeah, and so I was just like, I just don't fucking get this, man. Like, I just couldn't buy it. I'm like, okay, so you're in the golden age, right? Supposedly, when you're in the golden age, we understand everything. We have full understanding of spirit, of time, of energy, of matter, pretty much everything. We can freaking see how the universe is constructed by looking at it. Right, our understanding and knowledge is perfect. Like we live enormously long lives. We're all perfectly healthy, and just like anybody that living in this age is like, this is the golden age, right? They have technology that doesn't. They have technology that's just beyond any kind of understanding of ours, and they also have the mental fortitude and the civilizational. What's the word am I thinking of? Maturity to not fucking destroy themselves with it, right?
Yeah.
So they have this amazing civilization, but then so what I'd be asking the people in these Facebook groups, and I'm saying, so then you would tell me that in this golden age, obviously they're fully aware of this cycle. Why do they let it go back down?
Yeah.
Like, how do these golden age dudes who have like complete control of everything about their bodies and their spirits and their fucking universe and all this shit let themselves go back into the Silver Age?
Maybe they don't. Maybe they leave.
Right. The answer I got most often was, I don't know. Maybe they don't. You know. And so I started. So all these badasses like with huge heads like fucking take off.
But that makes me think of the whole tradition with the Egyptians about becoming a star. Like they would do all this stuff to become a star. Like maybe there was. I started thinking about that idea that stars are intelligent beings. Like we've discussed this before.
Yeah.
So during the golden age, when they understand that, it can be done, and they do that. And,
Right.
and so then as you fall out of the golden age, there's whatever's left here, there's a memory of that ability, and they're like sort of doing this shit by rote. They don't understand it, but they're like, okay, we got to do this type of thing. If you live your life a certain way,
Yeah.
and
What
you
I
follow
could
these rules, and
basically what I could never grasp was the downslope. Like, I comprehend what we're on right now, which was the upslope. We're going out of the Iron Age into the Bronze Age. We're going to go from the Bronze Age to the Silver Age. We're going to go into the Gold Age. What I don't understand is when you're in the Gold Age and you're a Gold Age person, how you allow that to sink back down into the Silver Age and go back down all the way to the Iron. I mean, I'm just like, why would this? How this? And then what's the mechanism for this? Like, why does this happen, right? But then one day, and I can't remember exactly who it was that did this, but. And maybe no one did this. Maybe I've like had this realization myself, but I suddenly realized that, wait a minute, like, it's called the Great Year. It's called that for a reason. It's connecting it to other cycles, the regular year. And I realized, like, wait, we have 4 seasons in the regular year, and those 4 seasons like drastically affect all life on the planet. Just like and then I'm thinking about like so does the day. Like we have a day and night cycle, and it's I mean like everything changes
Yeah.
because of that cycle. Like you go in 24 hours, you go from dark to light, and like if anybody who's been awake early in the morning, like when the sun is coming up, and the whole fucking planet wakes up, and all the birds start doing shit, and like everything starts moving around or whatever, And then you go through the entire day, and like you get into midday, and it gets hot or whatever, and things calm down. And then you go, all you hear is crickets, just like they're buzzing or whatever. And then it gets to the evening, and other things start happening. The bats come out, and all
Yeah.
And like,
But even just the human cycle, like we are active during the day. We're doing all this stuff, and then getting near the evening, we calm down, and then we actually go into sleep.
yeah,
Which is like all physical activity
right,
ceases, and we're like, what is happening to our
Yeah.
minds? Like,
Yeah.
what? So that's
same thing with-
badass. Like,
yeah.
like we go through this cycle where at some point, like in the Iron Age, we pretty much go to sleep.
right. So it's and the same thing with the year. You have fall, or you have spring, summer, winter, or fall, winter, right?
Yeah.
And those drastically change everything, and including us. Like a lot of people in the winter, if they're up north or whatever, they get depressed. It's
Yeah.
dark all the time. They're like sad because the days are short. And then
Yeah, like
summer's
some
bad.
animals hibernate throughout the whole thing. too.
Yeah.
It's like one big day-night.
Yeah, they just
cycle
clock
for
out.
them.
Yeah. So when I had this realization, I'm like, wait, we have a year that has 4 quote unquote ages in it, seasons. And those seasons are based on nothing more than like the tilt of the planet's axis and where it is in its orbit around the sun. And that drastically changes everything. And I'm like, okay, now I can buy the concept that we're in this great year cycle and we're moving around something is happening, and that can cause these vast seasons.
Yes.
Which are the yugas, okay?
Yes. It's freaking bad.
So the golden age is like summer. I fucking hate summer, but it's like summer. Right. That's what they always equate.
Yeah, but think about it. It's like in economics. When one person loses in a profit and loss system, somebody else benefits, or that opens up opportunity for others. So
Yeah.
So like,
not a
if
zero-sum
one
game.
company goes out of business, that actually
Frees up resources for other people to do stuff. Yeah.
So like there are those wintertime people,
Yeah.
right? So in the same
Right, but
sense,
the wintertime in this is the Kali Yuga, and it's like no one benefits from that.
But there are all through these dark times, there are quote unquote prophets or whatever, these certain people that are
Yeah.
just like, they're badasses, Viracocha and all that kind of shit.
Yeah. And also, so the other concept of the yugas is that each, and this also happens with the great year, the conception of the great year is that each age is preceded, or each age is ended and or begun with a cataclysm.
Right.
Okay, so this partially answers the question of how do the people in the golden age let it go down to the silver? Well, they get fucking destroyed in the cataclysm. Right. And then when everything rebuilds back up, it's the silver age. They don't quite achieve the heights that they were before, but they'll remember it. They're like, it was better. Like, and they may see remnants of it. Think about that. We're looking at remnants of the previous silver and possibly some of the gold age from these enormous megaliths.
Yeah.
Baalbek is probably from the bottom stones. The Trilithon is probably from the golden age. But the next stuff, all these polygonal, like, they're still big, like Sacsayhuaman or whatever. That's probably the silver age people. They're not the same people that did like Ollantaytambo, which are these gigantic freaking square, like rectangular, huge blocks. They're doing something else. It's not quite as enormous. It's still amazing, and we can't do it. But it isn't like Baalbek. It's not the same thing. And so, like Jesus Gamarra talked about like Hanan Pacha, and he had in Peru he identified, him and his father identified 3 different stages of civilization. The original, the oldest one, they called Hanan Pacha, and those stones are just freaking enormous, right? They're just, you can tell, they're huge, and you're like, yeah, that's Hanan Pacha. And then the next stage are the people that built with the pillowed sort of like heterogeneous, like interlocking blocks. They're still huge, but they're not that original shit. And that makes sense to me. So like that's Gold Age stuff, and then the Silver Age people come along and they see this Golden Age shit and they're like, holy crap, right? We can't do that. How do they fucking do that? But they build their stuff around it, and then now we're looking at their stuff going, holy crap.
Yeah.
You know, and then look at the stuff beneath it and be like, oh my God. Right? So, but we're getting back into the Bronze Age now where we understand energy, but like supposedly the Silver Age, it's like matter, energy, and something else. And then in the Gold Age, it's spirit, and I don't know. I can't remember all the things that we understand, but supposedly, and we have been at the antipode of the last Golden Age, like kind of on the opposite side of the wheel from it.
Right.
But we're at the antipode of the destruction, so we're on our leg up. They were on their leg down.
Yeah.
So the Younger Dryas destruction was the end of the Golden Age.
It's freaking badass.
So the people,
it sucks.
Yeah. So the people that built Göbekli Tepe were brand new Silver Age people. And if it's a memorial, they were lamenting the lost Golden Age. And pointing out
Ours.
maybe, yeah, ours somehow, for some reason. Because, like, seriously, when you look at the cycle as a wheel, you have to wonder, like, why are they pointing to this, you know, like, because you were saying, like, well, maybe they were pointing to, like, the previous time,
Yeah.
or maybe they're pointing to, like, the next time, you know, like, 2 rotations down the line. But it's like...
Yeah, that doesn't make sense that you would do that.
Right, but it does make you wonder why they're pointing, because it's like, well, you know...
But it wouldn't really matter, I guess, if the cycles are the same. If they
That's
have
what
the
I'm
same
saying.
characteristics,
They
they're
may
pointing
not.
to our time, and it doesn't matter which time our time is.
Right, because it's the same time.
Right.
But the thing is, like, so we have...
If they were pointing at night, it wouldn't matter which night.
But it does, right? Because you're right, it's night. But we have winters, and we have really, really, really fucking bad winters.
Right.
And then we have mild winters. So they may be pointing out that we're about to have a bad...
Kick-ass. Oh.
No, I think it's because they're talking... Yeah. They're talking about we're actually coming out of winter and going into spring.
Dude, it's something you just said. I'm going to have to throw this in there. It's made me think. Göbekli Tepe. Wheels within wheels.
Yeah, that's what it is.
All those freaking rings, dude.
I wonder what that means in Sumerian. Göbekli Tepe. I'd like to find that out. It probably means, like, you know...
Go back in time.
Yeah. Construction to tell you you're fucked is probably what it means. So, going back to the...
It's their way of saying, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Go fleck your tepe.
Go fleck your tepe. That's right. So, yeah, so go back to the cataclysm and stuff, and the idea of it happening every age. Like, you go to the Greeks, you know, to Plato and his Timaeus and Critias dialogues or whatever with these guys who were talking to each other about Atlantis. So Solon, you know, so Plato's it's either his ancestor or one of his students' ancestors. Solon,
Yeah.
He's not kicked out, but he's kind of, he goes on exile, right? He was a political figure and he pissed somebody off. So he's like, I'm gonna go to Egypt, right? So he leaves. He gets out of town for like 10 years or so, and he's in Sais. I think it's Sais. It's a place. It's
Six.
yeah, it's a place in Egypt that no longer exists. The town, or I think it's a temple. It's a huge complex or whatever, and the priests there, they say that their job was to preserve ancient history, like all the knowledge or whatever. And so, you know, in the dialogues or whatever, Plato is basically describing what Solon had brought back with him, and Solon lived in 600 BC. So I think it was a long time before Plato's time. But Solon's talking to the priest there or whatever. The priest is like, "You Greeks don't remember who you are. You don't. Your country was once great and powerful with a proud people who were, you know, highly accomplished. But you had to start again like children. You remember the last destruction, but that's all you remember. We remember 6 previous destructions."
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah, and the Hopi say that this is the fifth world.
Yeah.
I mean, there's you know
that also gives you an idea of how old the culture is, or the
Kemet.
Kemet, the recorded knowledge.
And Solon
of Egypt.
Solon was talking to the ragtag end of it.
Exactly.
Those priests who were like, fucking, to everybody else at the time, they were super badass, but they knew that they were the tailing end of it.
Right. And they told him that they told him about Atlantis.
Yeah.
Which had sunk under the sea or under the ocean 9,000 years before his time.
Right. They said that the Atlanteans were a great and good people and had achieved much. They had become like gods, and then they became haughty. They became proud in their achievements, and how did they put it? They ceased to hold their achievements and wealth with humility.
Yeah.
And they basically set out to conquer the world. They're like, we should control this whole fucking planet. Like, we're badass. And they set out and then so they were destroyed. Their entire civilization was destroyed, he said, in a day and a night.
Yeah.
Sank beneath the waves, swallowed by the sea.
But it's like, I thought about that.
No.
When they become haughty, they start becoming sort of concerned with themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if they were in the golden age, if they were in the golden age and they understood all of this stuff about the universe, but then they began to think about themselves more and pay attention to themselves, like, oh, we're badass, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And forget the signs of the world that they lived in, the universe itself. And so I mean, there's any way you could look at it, but, they thought they were greater than the destruction that was going to come.
Right. They considered themselves to be greater than the universe itself.
Right. That's just setting yourself up for destruction.
I like to do it the other way. I like to use the universe. Like, so whenever something happens to me that just fucking sucks, like, you're in a situation like, God damn it. And like all this, like, you're in some drama or whatever, shit's going down. I like to think about the universe and just how enormous it is and all the shit out there. And I realize that, like, I live on this tiny little freaking dot.
Yeah.
In this tiny little dot, in a tiny little dot, inside of a bunch of little dots. That's like in a huge, enormous thing of billions and trillions of dots. And I'm like, all this drama and shit, it is nothing.
Right.
Like, so the reverse of that is really therapeutic. Because you can use it to, like, you can just, I don't know, it just, like, every time I do it, it just lifts you back up out of whatever fugue you're in, because you're just like, this is, it doesn't mean anything.
I'm on a rolling ball in space.
Yeah. I'm fucking rolling around on a ball in space.
Yeah, that's badass, dude.
Yep. So all this shit's connected.
With dots.
And bananas.
It's basically a dotted snake eating a banana. The Ouroboros.
The banana rose. Yeah, I got one more thing I wanted to add, and this is kind of a tangent, or sort of like a connected topic, but not really. It's not required to be like, look at how all this stuff's connected, but like the caduceus, the staff with the
serpents,
the twirly snakes of it. That was the sign of. I realized, I'm like, that's the sign of Hermes Trismegistus. The Romans called Hermes Mercury. And I was thinking about that, and how in the Vimana Shasta, the Vimanas were powered by a mercury vortex plasma engine. And I'm like,
yeah.
That's what that is. The staff is the plasma thing going in the middle, and the mercury, the snakes are the mercury twirling around it.
Yeah, that's badass.
Because what did the Romans say? What did Hermes was what? The Mercury, Mercury was the messenger of the gods. He flew through the air.
Once again, figuring out science.
That's right.
With ancient myths.
That's right. The frickin' Caduceus is a map for how to build a Vimana engine, a power plant.
All right, get to work out there, Adamu.
That's right.
Build us some Viamanas.
That's right. And remember, you can only eat bananas and green beans while you're doing it.
And you must control them with snakes.
That's right. So you guys can get a hold of us at Brothers of the Serpent.
830-688
near. You can go to brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com to comment. You can also go there to check the show notes if you want, or you can check the show notes in your podcast viewer. They should all show up in there, the pictures and the links. You can email us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. And anybody who gets a chance or feels up to it, hop on iTunes and give us a good review. 5 stars and say we're badass.
We don't care what you think.
That's right.
Just do it that way.
Yeah. I mean, don't do it if you're not going to do that. If you're going to do it, you need to be like 5 stars and they're badass. Okay. That's all I want. I don't want to log in there and be like 5 stars and yeah, these guys are okay. No. 5 stars and they're badass. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
For all them 5 stars.
Stars. Yeah. That's what we need to do. We need to figure out how to become stars. Right? We did, like the Egyptians, we can die and become our own 5 stars.
You can write like a kick-ass rock song. Become a star, man.
Yeah. First I need Eddie Van Halen. Yeah, thanks to Laura for the intros and me for part of the intro this time.
That's right.
Thanks to everybody for their questions and their comments and their criticisms, I guess. And thanks to AWACS Productions, Aetherium Studios, and that's about it. All you listeners out there, we appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Good night, Adamu. Take a vacation.